The sun sank low over the town of Dry Creek, spilling copper light across the dirt road until it seemed the earth itself burned with old sorrow. Dust clung to the air, soft as ash, drifting on the faintest wind. The saloon's doors groaned with laughter and boots behind them, while the church bell gave one weary toll, calling a few faithful toward evening prayer. Among it all, moving slow as a shadow no one wanted to see, came Clara May Dawson. Her bare feet whispered in the dirt, a bundle of laundry pressed tight against her ribs, as though it were the only shield she owned. The people of Dry Creek watched without turning their heads. A whisper passed from porch to porch, hushed and sharp. That poor girl, always bruised, always bent, her dress was torn at the hem, her cheek blooming with fresh purple. She walked fast, eyes lowered, like one afraid the air itself might strike her. And still, she carried a beauty that could not be hidden, a kind of fragile grace born of enduring what should have broken her. At the corner by the general store stood Miss Lillian Hart, arranging bolts of cloth in the window. She leaned closer to another woman, her voice low but meant to be overheard. "Clara May stays 'cause she likes it, mark my word. Some women don't know better than the pain they're given." The words curled into the street like smoke, and Clara May heard every one. She clutched the laundry tighter, kept walking, shame burning hotter than the bruises. No defense rose to her lips. She had learned silence was safer. Home waited at the edge of town, a cabin that sagged as if weary of housing cruelty. Inside, Ezekiel Dawson sat slumped at the table, whiskey bottle near his hand, cards scattered in frustration. His eyes were red-rimmed, his beard unshaven, his soul eaten by debts and rage. The door creaked beneath Clara May's touch, and in that instant his head lifted. "You're late," he growled. "I hurried," she whispered, setting the bundle down. His fist struck the table, rattling the empty cups. "Don't hurry enough. Don't please enough. Don't ever do a damn thing right." She bowed her head, said nothing, and when he shoved her shoulder she caught herself on the wall, breathing through the sting. In the corner lay a broken chair she had tried to mend. In the hearth, cold ashes that hadn't known warmth in weeks. Clara May touched her ribs lightly, as if to remind herself they still held. That night, she hummed a lullaby no one listened to, pressing herbs against her bruises by the dim light of a lantern. The house smelled of smoke and bitterness, and still she whispered, "One day, maybe gentle will come." The days passed like that, sorrow marked by sunrises and bruises. Yet Dry Creek was a place where loneliness rode as freely as any horse, and another figure watched her without declaring it. Silas Boone, the wealthy rancher who lived beyond the northern ridge, carried his own silence like a cloak. Folks called him proud, some called him haunted, but no one dared call him weak. His land stretched farther than sight, cattle grazing under the watch of tall pines, yet he rode into town often, never with company. One evening, Clara May bent to gather apples spilled in the dust outside the store. Her hands trembled. Ezekiel stood behind her, sneering, half-drunk already. She fumbled, dropping more than she saved, while the crowd pretended not to notice. Then a shadow fell beside her. Large hands, scarred from work yet steady, lifted the fallen apples one by one. When she dared raise her eyes, she met Silas Boone's gaze. There was no pity there, only something firmer, recognition, as if he saw her truth plain where others looked away. He set the apples gently into her basket. His voice was quiet but carried weight. "Ain't nobody ought to live with their head bowed." Her lips parted, but no words came. She nodded once, her throat burning, and he tipped his hat before stepping back, letting her walk away unclaimed, unshamed. Ezekiel muttered a curse under his breath, but he said no more. For the first time in years, Clara May felt the ground under her feet as something more than punishment. That night she lay awake, listening to the shutters rattle against the wind. She traced Silas Boone's words again and again in her mind, as if they were carved into her skin. Head bowed, she pressed her palm against her bruised cheek and thought, one day maybe gentle will come. The following Sunday, she entered the small church alone, Ezekiel still drunk from the night before. Reverend Pike preached softly of forgiveness, his voice tired yet kind. Clara May sat in the back pew, hands folded, eyes lowered. When she lifted them once, she saw Silas across the aisle. He sat straight-backed, his hat resting on his knee, eyes closed as though listening harder than anyone else. When the service ended, he did not speak to her. But as he walked past, his gaze lingered for the briefest moment, steady as stone, carrying something she had not felt in years: respect. She stepped outside into the glare of noon, her heart unsteady. Townsfolk murmured nearby, their words like burrs against her skin. Yet beneath that noise, one truth pulsed in her chest. Someone had seen her, truly seen her, and had not turned away. As she walked the road home, the sky spread wide and endless above, a canvas of pale blue that promised storms yet to come. And though her shoulders sagged under old burdens, there was the faintest shift in her step, as if a door long shut had cracked open the smallest bit. When she reached the cabin, Ezekiel was waiting, drunk and seething, anger curled like a whip around his words. "You think you're better'n me, walking with your nose in the air?" His hand rose, fast as lightning. She braced for the blow, eyes shutting tight. But in the darkness behind her eyelids, she saw Silas Boone kneeling in the dust, his voice echoing like a vow: "Ain't nobody ought to live with their head bowed." And for the first time, she lifted her chin before the strike landed. The morning after the strike, Clara May's cheek bore the red swell of Ezekiel's hand, yet her eyes no longer carried only silence. Something had shifted, a seed pressed into the soil of her soul, and though the world still weighed heavy, she held her chin differently, as though testing the strength of a spine long bent. Ezekiel noticed. He spat in the dirt, muttering about women who forgot their place, but the tremor in his jaw betrayed unease. For the first time, he sensed the danger of losing his grip. That afternoon, when Ezekiel stumbled out of the saloon, the whole town watched him shove Clara May into the dust. She hit the ground hard, palms scraped, laundry scattering across the street. A gasp rippled through the onlookers, but no one stepped forward, only the hiss of whispers slithering from lips too fearful to act. The square hung silent, the air stretched taut, until boots thudded against the dirt with calm, deliberate weight. Silas Boone emerged from the crowd. He was not hurried, nor angry, but steady, as though he carried the patience of mountains in his chest. His shadow fell over Clara May where she lay trembling, and Ezekiel, swaying in his drunken fury, laughed harshly. "This ain't your concern, Boone." Silas looked at him once, eyes cold as winter water. Then he knelt beside Clara May, lifting her gently, brushing the dust from her sleeve with a hand careful as prayer. When he spoke, his voice was low, but it stilled every whisper in the square. "That's enough, Zeke." Something in the tone, firm, unyielding, unafraid, stripped the moment of Ezekiel's power. The drunkard cursed, but his words landed empty, dissolving into the hush of the crowd. Silas rose, guiding Clara May upright, and with quiet resolve, he offered his arm. She hesitated, breath catching in her throat, but then she let her trembling hand rest against him. Together they walked through the parted crowd, whispers trailing behind like wind through dry grass. He did not take her back to the sagging cabin. Instead, he lifted her onto his horse, his movements slow, never forcing, letting her choose each step. The ride carried them beyond the town, past the ridge where pines rose tall, into the vast quiet of his ranch. Clara May clutched the saddle horn, her heart a wild bird, unsure if it beat from fear or relief. She had never known silence that wasn't empty. Here, the hush of the land felt alive, wind stirring needles, cattle lowing in the distance, the creek humming against its banks. Silas guided her inside his home, a wide cabin with polished wood and the scent of pine smoke lingering. He did not touch her wounds. Instead, he laid out a basin of clean water, folded cloths, a jar of balm. "For you," he said simply, and left her in peace. She stared at the offerings, her hands trembling, then dipped the cloth and pressed it against her cheek. The coolness was mercy itself. When supper came, he sat across the table, passing her bread before serving himself. The meal was plain: beans, meat, coffee, but each bite felt like grace. He spoke little, yet every act carried a weight of care. The way he filled her cup before his own, the way his eyes never roamed where they did not belong. It was not grand gestures that unsettled her heart, but these small, steady kindnesses, foreign as rain in drought. Days lengthened into a rhythm. Clara May tended the garden behind the cabin, her hands finding solace in the soil, while Silas worked the fences and cattle, always within sight but never pressing near. At night she would sit by the hearth, sewing small tears in garments he left for mending, not because he asked but because her hands yearned for purpose. Slowly, the bruises faded, though the deeper wounds remained, until laughter startled her one morning. It came from her own throat, fragile and untested, when a stray colt nudged her basket of apples and spilled them across the yard. She gasped, then laughed, the sound ringing through the air like something reborn. Silas looked up from his work. His mouth did not smile wide, but his eyes softened, and he spoke in a voice that seemed to carry more meaning than the words alone. "Good to hear." That evening, as she poured water into cups, her hands slipped, and a tin cup clattered against the floor. Instantly, shame washed her face, old habits bracing for scorn. But Silas stooped to pick it up, meeting her gaze. "Ain't nothing broken that can't be mended." The words lingered, weaving themselves into her heart like thread through fabric. It was not long before Ezekiel came. He stormed to the ranch one night, whiskey on his breath, rage in his eyes, shouting for his wife. Townsfolk followed at a distance, eager for spectacle, their whispers rising in the dark. Clara May froze at the doorway, fear curling tight in her chest. Silas stepped outside, broad shoulders blocking the lamplight. Ezekiel staggered closer, spitting venom. "She's mine, Boone. You got no right." Silas did not reach for his gun. He did not raise his fist. He stood calm, voice steady as stone. "She don't belong to you. She belongs to herself." The words fell heavy, louder than any shout. The crowd stirred, eyes widening, whispers shifting shape. Ezekiel sneered, raising his hand as if to strike her once more, but before he could, Clara May stepped forward. Her knees shook, but her chin stayed high. Her voice, though quiet, carried farther than she thought possible. "I won't go back." Gasps rippled. Miss Lillian Hart, who once whispered against her, pressed a hand to her mouth. Reverend Pike bowed his head as if in prayer. Ezekiel faltered, his bluster cracking beneath the weight of eyes now turned against him. For once, the gossip cut him instead. With a curse, he stumbled away, swallowed by darkness, powerless at last. Clara May's breath came in sobs, but they were not of fear. They were release, the flood of years damned now rushing free. Silas stood near, offering only his steady hand. She took it, and in the hush that followed, he spoke with quiet promise. "I'll be gentle every step." The crowd held its breath, watching not with judgment but awe. Clara May, bruised yet unbowed, stood taller than she ever had beneath the starlight. And as the people drifted back into the night, whispers turned softer, different now. Some said she had changed, some said the cowboy had saved her, but in her heart she knew the truth. She had saved herself, by finally believing she was worth saving. Still, as the wind swept cold across the ridge, she felt a shiver that was not only relief. For though Ezekiel had stumbled into shadow, shadows have a way of returning. And in the silence that followed, she wondered if the gentleness she had been offered could truly hold against the storms yet to come. Like a short film script?